For the last several months, I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube in particular about whether or not Ares and Races, as we know it, has become a dead art, and whether or not there's still a place for Ares and Races and emergency management. So although I am a ham operator, just 2 years now, I was inspired to become a ham radio operator by our Races leadership team in Tompkins County, New York. I'm not speaking here today as a ham radio operator. I'm speaking here today as an emergency manager, and I want to talk specifically about some best practices that we started in Tompkins County, New York, and also share some experiences from different events that I've participated in going back to 1995. So in my office, which is the Department of Emergency Response, we have several unique divisions in our department. The first is the Office of Emergency Management, which is, I think, what we're all here to really talk about how we can bridge the gap between MCOM and emergency management. I'm also responsible for the countywide EMS program, the public safety radio system, which we're going to touch on today, on how you can dovetail into that, the County 911 Center, and also the County Security Program. I've got over 35 years of experience in emergency management, dating back to about 1995. I was the emergency manager in New Jersey during several significant storms that included Hurricane Floyd, Hurricane Irene, Hurricane Sandy, Hurricane Lee, and a number of other events that rose to the level of a presidential declaration. And in every single one of those events, there was some place for MCOM. So we're going back nearly 30 years. I've done emergency management again at the local level, the county level, in healthcare. I've done it in post-secondary education, and again, now back here in Tompkins County, New York. I'd like to introduce my colleague and my individual that motivated me to become a ham radio operator, Jamie Arnold, who's the leader of our Races team.
Hey, good afternoon. That was a loud one. My name is Jamie Arnold. My call sign is Whiskey 2, Golf Papa Romeo, W2GPR, and right from Tompkins County. And my close friend here and the director of our 911 Center and our emergency management group has embraced what amateur radio can do for the hobby and for our community. I have a pretty extensive background in emergency services, grew up in and around the fire service, emergency medical, spent plenty of days in the back of ambulances and ran a lot of large-scale events and emergencies for the New York State Department of Transportation, as well as a lot of federal contract work. I've always loved the amateur radio hobby and just have embraced what it can do to help serve our community. And with our Races team, as we were looking to try to build that Races team, we just were floored by the obstacles that were there early on, and it wasn't until we met the benefits of having someone that understands everything that we could bring to the table that our team really grew, and the team really was able to grow into what it is today.
All right, thank you. As we go through the presentation today, I really would like this to be conversational in nature. So what Jamie and I are going to do is, if you have a question as we're going through it, raise your hand, because I think this is also an opportunity for everybody in this room that obviously either has a leadership role in either Races, Ares, or MCOM, or maybe is interested in joining a team or maybe be on a team to help share your ideas so we can all learn together. All right, so again, what really motivated me back in, I'd say probably about October or November of last year, I started seeing a lot of YouTube videos, influencers that I have a lot of respect for, that do some great work in the amateur radio arena, talking about whether or not there's still a place for amateur radio in emergency management. And what I thought when I watched these videos was the voice that we're missing was somebody in emergency management to speak firsthand about the value of what the folks in this room bring to the table during an event, and really, quite frankly, during blue sky days as well. And we're going to talk a little bit about that later on, some examples of what we do to keep our team interested in working with us, and also giving them some unique responsibilities that maybe you can bring back to your area. So the question is there still a place for amateur radio and public safety? And if you notice, I'm not just saying emergency management here, I'm saying public safety, and I'm doing that for a very specific reason. The word on the street is that local emergency management doesn't want to work with us. And also that ham radio isn't relevant anymore in MCOM today. And what I'm here to tell you is an emergency manager, again, a practitioner in the industry for over 35 years and working very closely with groups such as your own in 3 different states now. Generally speaking, I think as long as you can promote a good, healthy program, and you have the right ambassador for your program, you can build a team or improve the team in your community. This is one of the leading titles that I've seen in videos over the last several months. And again, influencers I have a lot of respect for, but don't necessarily have a background in emergency management, have come to the conclusion that it's pretty much dead. And again, I'm here to say that it's not. So the question is, what do we really have to offer? What is the role of amateur radio in emergency management, and what do you think your job is? Does anybody want to throw out an example of what you think is an answer to one of these two questions?
You need to be able to do whatever they want. With the example we have in our county, when we started amateur radio, we need to be multiple roads.
I love that answer. What he said is we need to be prepared to do whatever they would like us to do in our community. And I think that that's a really strong takeaway, because I think on our side of the table, we have a very specific idea of what we should be doing, and perhaps it's not what you think you should be doing, but more of what you're assigned to do. True or false, our team should be in the Emergency Operations Center. Raise your hand if you believe that your team should have a seat in the Emergency Operations Center. Okay? Yes?
Can you differentiate between Ares and Races?
Sure, I'm going to be honest with you. I mean, the way I look at it is, Ares is, something that's obviously promoted through the ARRL. I don't have a lot of experience with Ares teams. I have more experience with Races teams, but Races teams have to be affiliated with a local emergency management program. So whereas I look at Ares, which I think in many communities, it's the right model for that community. It's more set up like a club, whereas the Races teams are really designed to work directly and are identified as an entity of the emergency management division. So our Races team, there is a line item in our budget to help support the Races team, and we weekly or actually monthly with our Races team leaders, we do drills through our office. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen at the Ares level or with an Ares group, but that to me is the biggest distinction. But again, I'm here to learn as well, so if anybody would like to add to that, I'd love to hear it, yes.
I thought Races was part of FEMA.
Well, Races is not part of FEMA. Races is recognized by FEMA, but especially in states like New Jersey and New York, which I can speak a little bit more intelligently about, they again have to be affiliated with a local emergency management organization. Now in New Jersey, where I was a municipal emergency management coordinator during some of those events that I had talked about earlier, we did have a local team and we had a county team. But in New Jersey, anybody here from New Jersey, just out of curiosity? Whereabouts? South Jersey, so south of Freehold. So I'm from Central Jersey, Somerset County. Okay, so nice to see a fellow Jersey guy. But the point is that the way they're structured, it's again, are you Races or Ares? Is that curiosity? Ares. Okay, so then you can speak a little bit more for now. Yeah. I don't want to draw a huge distinction between the two, because I think it really does depend on what's right for your community. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But to clear the question up, if you didn't hear the question, it was, he thought that Races was part of FEMA. It is not. It's recognized by FEMA. They have education through FEMA, but it's not actually part of FEMA. Please.
So from the beginning, everything that I understood about Ares versus Races and those conversations of why one is better than the other, the one thing that always stood out to me was the simple verbiage of go lay down. During a natural disaster, when something is terrible and it's big and it's blown up, if we can be told to stay off the air or not, and what those repeaters can be used for, and how you can quote unquote take things over. With the Races program, there is specific verbiage that's in there that specifically states that we can stay on the air when we're operating under the purview of a Department of Emergency Response. I see a lot of people nodding their heads yes, and that to me is what was the biggest difference for when we were looking at Ares versus Races, we were much more interested in the Races part of it. But again, that also was possible because of the support that we have through our Department of Emergency Response. It would have never been possible with an entity that didn't support us or didn't embrace us the way that they did. So your mileage may vary if you're better off with Ares versus Races.
What I've done here, I've got two different slides that give you a sample of what a table of organization would look like for a typical event involving an EOC activation. And if you look, I have highlighted where the communication unit is. Typically what you're going to see in an emergency operations center are the ones, the horizontal row where it says operations section, planning section, logistics section, or finance section. So for those that raise their hand about whether or not you should have a seat at the EOC, I'm going to say, like everything I've learned from experienced ham operators, it depends. Now, in our model, we do have a seat in our EOC for our races team, but not every organization is going to be set up that way. So I thought if you could see where you might fall on a table of organization, it might give you some more context as to who might actually be representing you in the EOC. And at the end of the day, it really comes down to your logistics officers, because this is another model, and if you see, the communication leader is going to report up to the service branch and up to logistics. So you may not necessarily be in an EOC, but it doesn't mean that you still have a very critical role for your operation. But I just wanted to kind of put to bed that if you're told that you don't belong in the EOC, that's okay. You still have a role, and you still might have a very large impact on that operation. So don't be offended if your emergency manager tells you you don't have a seat in the EOC. This gentleman over here almost took my quote, because I think it's really relevant. So I put this together a couple days ago because I thought that for our team and some of what we do, which might seem a little outside of traditional communications, is really pretty critical. But during an emergency or disaster, you might have very strong beliefs about your role and what you think you should be performing. However, your responsibilities may change based on the incident action plan, the incident commander, or the EOC manager. So to ensure effective and coordinated response, it's essential to remain flexible and carry out the role that you're assigned, even if it differs from your expectations. I think that's pretty important, because what we've learned with our team is, although we have a very robust public safety radio system, I've worked in 2 systems where the public safety radio system has failed. Sometimes it fails not because it necessarily breaks, but because there's so much activity because of the type of event that the community is experiencing, that there really isn't a lot of capacity in the system. So you need to go to some form of aux communications, because you really need to leave those frequencies available for the first responders. So that's an important takeaway, because that might mean that maybe you're asked to do some form of communication for maybe a unique aspect of the event, but maybe you're not necessarily passing 911 level traffic, but maybe we just need to have communications established for a particular branch that doesn't necessarily have priority in the public safety radio system, but we still need to be able to communicate with them. So for those that are familiar with public safety radio systems, most modern day public safety radio systems are trunked P25 compliant systems. So there's priorities that are established in the system that really dictate who can talk on the air and when. If you live in a really large urban area or suburban area, if you have, like in New Jersey, where I experienced some pretty heavy flooding with Hurricane Irene and Sandy, first responders that were out there doing water rescue were really utilizing the system at its maximum capability. That's really all we could really do, was leave the available bandwidth of that system available for people that were conducting rescues. So one thing that we did in New Jersey during those storms is we were embedding races teams into local EOCs and passing 911 traffic from the county 911 center to the local EOC, where we had a staging area of police, fire, and EMS, and that's how we were essentially dispatching those units to their events. Because during a major event, not only are you dealing with the unique rescues or storm or specific events, you still have to do your daily 911 calls. So what we did is we just put everybody on VHF. We had races again embedded in our local EOC, and they were passing traffic from the 911 center back to the local EOC for what we would consider to be less critical calls, but yet our standard, more run-of-the-mill calls that we would get at any particular time on any given day. Yes.
When you're talking about putting on VHF, you're putting them on your VHF.
No, we're putting them, okay.
So I'm going to repeat the question when he said when you're talking about putting them on VHF, the question was if he was putting me on the local 911 system's VHF, and that wasn't the case. It was using the amateur radio operator's gear and technology and expertise.
Yeah. For those people that, again, have experience with public safety radio systems, if you work or are involved in a system where there's a lot of entities on it, you might be familiar with the bunk. Does anybody know what I mean when I say the bunk? Right? So that can happen is if everybody's trying to talk in a system at once, and when that happens, it's like a busy signal. And so what happens is again, in those events in New Jersey, what we were experiencing, we had a lot of fire departments and rescue squads that were out in the field conducting water rescues for a countywide flood. There really wasn't any capacity for, again, the traditional day-to-day traffic. So our races team set up a communications plan on the fly that would allow us to be able to communicate with our first responders that were doing the more day-to-day calls that they would typically have to handle anyway.
What I've been preaching in Minnesota is that our emergency managers need our skills as trained communicators. It doesn't really matter what equipment we use. We learn our skills with amateur radio, but whatever radio they hand us, we can work with.
So that's a great point. What it did, for any of those who couldn't hear him, is what we offer as amateur radio operators is our communication professionalism. You know, with what we're used to doing, how we're used to doing what we're doing, we can pretty much step in and grab anything. That is where our team really shined. And when we look at this slide that says opportunities, don't limit yourself to just trying to work with emergency management. Our team, when our team was being built and our incredible group of volunteers was doing what they were doing, it's tough. It's tough to get into some of those conversations. And we were able to do exactly what you said. We just kind of showed up at some meetings that we were invited to and said, this is what we can do. This is basically a menu of all the incredible things that our people are capable of. We can send you pictures, we can send you data, we can do all this crazy stuff. You want to talk to 2 miles away or 2,000 miles away, we can do it. And we're going to be over here practicing and honing our skills, and if you need us, great, and if you don't, then you don't keep us in mind.
At a interoperability conference in Michigan put on by FEMA, DHS, and the Michigan State Police, the professional first responders, their words in the amateur radio community that was present at the meeting was, just shut up. Meaning, we are blabbermouths. We talk way too much. When you've got the message, say clear, you know, that sort of thing. But we blabber on.
So essentially, if you heard what he said was, you know, we talk, we're communicating. I'm the worst. You'll find out by the end of this. I'm an over-communicator. Just make it clear, make it short, make it sweet, and be done with it.
Yeah, that's right. So, again, emergency management is just one segment of the public safety community. So it's trying to identify what your community needs and what you have to offer. And that's what our races team has done in Tompkins County. So although all these various public safety entities fall underneath our umbrella in our Department of Emergency Response, we do some very specific tasks that our races team does. Think about your community and think about what you think you can offer your specific community, and just don't be hyper-focused on emergency management. In our community, yes, 911 falls under me, falls underneath my department, but that's not the way it is in all communities. Sometimes the 911 director is an equivalent or an equal to the emergency management coordinator. So if you're trying to develop a relationship with the emergency management coordinator, maybe that individual doesn't necessarily appreciate what you bring to the table, but it doesn't mean that your 911 center director may not appreciate what you bring to the table. What I learned from our races team is that I have a think tank of leaders. And so when we've had problems in our county, I can really rely on them to help me try to solve a problem. Where again, later on, we're going to review some of what we've done locally that maybe again might help inspire you to bring back to your area. But again, if you're not getting anywhere with emergency management, maybe you can look towards another entity in your community, one of which is healthcare. So I mentioned earlier that I've done emergency management in healthcare, and there's a real need for that in healthcare. Jamie and our races team coordinated a really sophisticated communication exercise with the Central New York Healthcare Coalition that he's going to talk about in a few minutes. But again, that might be something that maybe would fit what you're able to offer in your community. It's not necessarily directly connected to your county or your local emergency management, but there's an area that there's often quite a need, and they're looking for amateur radio operators to work with. Recently, after they did an exercise, I reached out to a colleague of mine in Pennsylvania and said, hey, maybe what we could do is take what you're doing in Pennsylvania, what we're doing in New York, and we can bridge that, and maybe we could do a multi-state exercise. And he was really excited about that. We're really excited about that. And again, it's not necessarily emergency management, it's really the healthcare arena, but it's just an area that maybe you haven't even thought about that you maybe might want to approach. Now, in the 2 hospitals that actually our healthcare system had 5 hospitals. Every single hospital EOC had an amateur radio in it. At the time, I didn't know what I was looking at because again, I just got my ticket in December of 23. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it was there. But I also knew I had people in the hospital that could operate it and knew how to operate it. And I was in our EOC during COVID. Now, we didn't use it during COVID, but we had a plan to use it during COVID. So that was an example of where when we brought those amateur radio operators into the hospital EOC, and we started thinking about, okay, what do we need to do about a communication plan between these 5 hospitals that bridged the states of Pennsylvania and New York? You know, maybe we could have some redundant communication here, but they offered that to the conversation. I didn't because I didn't know what I didn't know. Please.
For the St. Louis area, we have over 30 hospitals permanently located within those hospitals.
So I'm here, maybe it's louder now, repeat it.
I'm from the St. Louis area.
I'm from the St. Louis area, and we have over 30 hospitals with amateur radio equipment permanently located in those hospitals, and those radios are tested on either a monthly or a quarterly basis. So there is a desire for that.
Again, another great example. I really appreciate your feedback and your insight because, again, I think what I've heard in some of these YouTube videos is, well, there's really no place for us in MCOM, there's no place for us with emergency management, missing the fact that there's so many other aspects of what we do. Yes, sir.
Ditto for what he said from St. Louis. Kansas City area has 35 hospitals coordinated over 9 counties. I'm just going to say, facilitated installing equipment in the emergency rooms, practiced a minimum of once a month, badged by the hospitals and badged by the EOC people.
That's great, thank you. We have another hand over here.
And the hospitals typically operate a version of ICS called HICS.
That's right.
Or hospital ICS. It's slightly different, the forms are a little bit different, but many of the WinLink applications and such also include HICS forms.
That's right.
So pay attention to those.
Yeah, I think that's really important because, sometimes too people, are you all familiar with the term NIMS, National Emergency Management System? Well, sometimes folks use the term NIMS and ICS synonymously, and they're really not. ICS is a component of NIMS. HICS in healthcare is, again, a component of NIMS. Hospitals are still required to be NIMS compliant, but it also, NIMS is what speaks to the need to have redundancy. And it's what speaks specifically to the need to make sure that there's communication redundancy. So if you're looking to get your foot in the door and you're looking to speak the language to a local emergency manager, whether it's healthcare, whether it's post-secondary education, I worked in Philly for several years, running a public safety program there, and we didn't have amateur radio operators in the university, but the city did. And we were trying to figure out how we could integrate that into the school because we were a pod for the health department in the city. So we felt like if we're going to be a pod of points of distribution for vaccines, then we should make sure we have some form of redundant communication or some communication with the EOC. So what I want to point out here, which is really important, in public safety, we do risk assessments and then we do needs assessments, right? So the risk assessment is, okay, what are our risks, what are our vulnerabilities? And then after we do that, we do a needs assessment. Okay, now that we know what our vulnerabilities are, what do we need to solve that vulnerability? I haven't been involved in a single event since the early 90s that when you look at an after action report where communication isn't the #1 issue for any major event, right? So we're going right back to what we offer the community and how we can help to really, again, bridge gaps between our community and emergency management, regardless, or public safety, regardless of the partner that we're looking to help. Also, think about like the National Weather Service. So an interesting thing happened. So a couple weeks ago, I took a Skywarn class. Very first time I took a class, it was fantastic. And during the Skywarn class, the instructor said, again, this was something I knew nothing about, and he said, we have an amateur radio operator in our National Weather Service in Binghamton. And so after the class, I went up to him and I said, well, who's doing that? Is it somebody that works for the National Weather Service? He goes, no, it's actually somebody from a local club. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic. I said, I'm going to be doing this presentation, and I'm going to bring this up because that may not be something that you necessarily thought about. It dovetails into emergency management, maybe not what you thought your role would be, but that could be something that maybe you can offer your community if you have that entity in your community. Do you want to talk a little bit about search and rescue, your vision for search and rescue?
Yeah, so like I said, when we went in there with our team, we knew what we're capable of, right? We know we can hook some wires to a box fan or a screen door and talk to Kosovo, or we can talk down the street. Like, that's what we're good at. Like, yeah, give me that challenge. So our team, you know, we went to the director, we went to in front of these fire chiefs and said, like I said, this is what we can do, this is what we're good at. Call us if you need us. But if you think about the other opportunities, not within just the 911 center, but if you have paid EMS centers, if you have a paid EMS department, and they're maybe not within the county system or a state system, or even if they are, if they have the potential to need an ancillary set of communication setup, what happens when they're completely overwhelmed within their P25 system? Can you relay that traffic for them? Could you maybe be at the hospital, sitting outside the ER to redeploy an asset? To be able to track mass casualty tags. That's the sort of thing that our team is practiced for. Search and rescue, those sort of things. You guys are incredible at APRS. I mean, think about what we do with APRS. To be able to get some cheap APRS setups and clip them to every search and rescue person's backpack and just tell them, go do your thing, and we're gonna be able to tell the incident commander everywhere you are, exactly where you are, and we could communicate with you with a whole separate setup if you have to. That's a huge, huge value that you bring to the community that they just don't capitalize on.
And in our community in Tompkins County, New York, we have several large state parks, and every year we have an event in one of our state parks. And what we've been looking to do in our program is not only look at amateur radio operation, but also GMRS, because a lot of these hikers go into the woods and into these state parks with the GMRS radio. So we're promoting and we're also supporting GMRS in this arena as well, because there's a real value in being able to communicate with people. And eventually what we're looking to do is that all the trailheads is have a GMRS frequency or channel that we're going to be monitoring. So if there's somebody who were to get lost in the woods, if they don't have cell signal, that our goal is to make sure we have good GMRS coverage throughout the entire county. And we're also using What's 3 Words. Are you familiar with What's 3 Words? Jamie, if you could just touch on that and the success we've had with that program as well.
So to piggyback off the GMRS program, we actually have a very robust GMRS program within our amateur radio group and within our races team with one of our coordinators whose life and soul is invested in it. What 3 Words is an incredible opportunity for you to be involved also, because everybody can hear those words and everybody can help. So What 3 Words is an app. It's recognized worldwide, and it basically uses 3 words that are very unique to a location, and it might be penguin, pancake, sailboat. And when you type those 3 words in, it's going to give you down to a very small area, about 50 square feet, depending on the nitty-gritty of it, of exactly where that person or that entity is. Really impressive and really very, very robust. Our dispatch service, I hear it get used within our 911 center regularly. It's incredibly useful for on-water rescues. It's very tough to say, I'm right across from that red barn with a flag on it, and behind me I can see a house with a light. I don't really narrow it down out in the middle of a 60-mile by 5-mile wide lake. But with What 3 Words, it's something that you could really do and be a huge ambassador to what we can do into the 911 system.
Part of the charm of living in the Finger Lakes region of New York is it's a beautiful area, very rural, but we have these 11 lakes, and Cayuga Lake, which goes through our county, it also touches several other counties, so we've used What 3 Words quite efficiently for water emergencies. All right, so let's talk about how you can start developing relationships with emergency manager. And honestly, this could translate to anybody in public safety, a partner that you feel that maybe you can offer your services to. First and foremost, don't think of yourself as a hobbyist or an amateur, right? You are subject matter experts in communication, and you offer a lot more than just being able to talk on a radio. You're really talking about trying to sell yourself, especially if you're in an area that hasn't previously embraced the program. Good example of this, so I've been a volunteer EMT since I was 15 years old. I first got certified in 1986. I was active for over 30 years. And it always would discourage me when somebody would say that a volunteer EMT or a volunteer firefighter isn't a professional. They are. And so what I'm telling you is, yes, we're amateur radio operators, but you're professional, and when we have an event or an incident, that's the mindset that I would like for you to bring to the conversation. Don't allow previous leaders or their attempts to define the future or opportunity. I think sometimes what's happened is maybe one person had an interaction with an emergency manager or public safety official, and they'll go back to the club or back to the team and say, well, that person, they don't really want anything to do with us. Maybe you distinctly think about who is the ambassador and make sure you're picking the right personality. Emphasize your, I'm sorry.
We use the phrase, volunteer is just a paper.
That's right. That's right.
Volunteer is just a pay grade. That's take that one home. That's the word again.
And to elaborate, I just say paramedics because I'm an EMT. Paramedic is on a rank, it's a certification, so we can all work together. So, all right, emphasize your capabilities and how they're applicable during an emergency in your community. So again, this goes back to doing that needs assessment. What do you really need in your community? Schedule a meeting. Pick up the phone and schedule a meeting. My first introduction to Jamie was 2 years ago because he picked up the phone and scheduled a meeting. And he came in and he said, I'm going to be the new radio officer for the Races program. I'm with this group called Takara. And he's like, I'm like, okay. And he's like, but this is what we can offer you. And it all started with a meeting. And again, I was sold. Now we did have an existing team, but our current leadership really took it to the next level. So most good ideas come from brainstorming. And some of what Jamie has talked about today and about how our team operates have come from brainstorming. And again, I gotta emphasize, make sure you pick the right ambassador. Now for our races team, in order to join our races team, you have to come out of the Tompkins County Amateur Radio Club. You have to come out of that club, and that leadership has to recommend you for a position on the races team. So all of our members are part of the Takara Amateur Radio Club, but not everybody in Takara is on our races team. So keep that in mind. So there's almost like a double vetting process that's been very successful. Drills and exercises in the Blue Sky days, this is really important. So what's the difference between a drill and an exercise? And we do both with our team, and we do it frequently. So drills are just repetitive practice of a very specific skill. We do a drill every single month, and we try to do quarterly exercises. And that is often involving more than one entity. So typically drills will be very specific to one particular group, maybe a races group, law enforcement, EMS, fire, what have you. But when you start to bring all those different partners together, you're building a foundation for an exercise. And we try to do those quarterly. So one of the things that we do is a mass alerting system exercise where we use the RAVE system. We branded it Siren in our community, where our leadership in races will send out a message and say, if this was an actual event, would you be available? And it's expected that they get a response from everybody on the races team, whether it's a yes or a no. So that is done monthly. Quarterly, one of the exercises that we practice most frequently in our community is the passing of information from the 911 center to the local fire department. So the way our program is set up is that our races teams have go boxes, if you will, an entire setup that James is going to talk about in a minute, but we deployed in the fire departments. And very similar to what we did when I was in New Jersey, the idea behind what we do is that we're going to send you to a fire department. That's going to be the local area communication hub where we're going to then pass information to fire and EMS for a response in that area. And we simulate a down 911 system or a system that's so overwhelmed that we have to have an alternative way of dispatching those services. So that's one of our quarterly exercises. The other thing that we did was during our triannual airport exercise at the Ithaca International Airport is we thought, hey, maybe we could take it a step further and have our races team be our staging leaders. And so that's something we've been experimenting with, and we did do it in our last exercise. But during the last exercise, our races team handled everything to do with staging. So for police, fire, and EMS on our airport exercise. It was a full-scale exercise. There were 50 actual victims, and we had our races team not only had communication between the command posts, but they were the ones passing traffic from the command post, the forward command post, back to the staging area and deploying the resources out of the staging area. So that was something that we came up organically that we could use our team for, that I hadn't seen used elsewhere. But that's an example of maybe where you could try to sell yourself, because I can tell you, having been an incident commander and an AOC manager, if my police, fire, and EMS are all tied up and emergency management's all tied up, I still might have to have a staging team. What better way or what better group to do it than a RACES or an Ares program? It's a really great opportunity for you to use tactical communication, get off the public safety radio system, while really satisfying very critical. So this is how our model is set up in Tompkins County. So our team leaders meet monthly with emergency management, 911, community preparedness, and our public safety radio systems managers. So that's all the divisions of my department. We currently have 25 members, and we really focus on passing of 911 center information. Again, not necessarily emergency management, another public safety entity, but that's what we have identified in our community through our needs assessment as a valuable tool that our races team can do for our community. Jamie, you want to talk a little bit more about the 12 operators and how you deploy to the firehouses?
Sure. So when we first started, we looked at the opportunity or what the need was of being able to go to the different departments all throughout the county and be able to regurgitate the information, if you will. Say the 911 center is absolutely overwhelmed. We would have operators at fire stations and potentially, intersections, anything like that for reporting. And when we first started looking at that model, we were looking at deploying, having permanently installed radios and power supplies, penetrations through roofs with antennas and all that stuff. And I don't know if y'all know anything about local and county and federal government, but they don't want to hear that me, the ham radio guy, is going to show up and stick a radio in your console and drill holes in your roof. And it was very, very complex, right? And we got a ton of pushback from agencies and departments because I'm that person. I'm a type A personality that's a go. I'm a jerk, right? So you're all of a sudden telling me that you're going to come into my fire station and stick a radio in there that now this person needs 24-hour access to the building. And, oh yeah, by the way, the ham radio laws, you're not allowed to touch this microphone. Well, it wasn't going well. So when I became the radio officer, we looked at it, we talked with our administrative team, and we looked at the potential of, I'm a big POTA guy, nowhere near when I tell you about his POTA numbers later, you can't even understand how he's only been a ham for a few years. But I've been field radio guy for a number of years, and I've got more radios and boxes and batteries in places than anything else. And I said, let's go with this. So we originally looked at FTM 400s because of what they would do with the camera mic and all that stuff. And so we did FTM 400s in boxes with power supplies, adapters, a J-pole radio, a piece of coax, a bag with a diamond antenna, and a tripod. The process before we got the grants and everything took too long. COVID hit, the 400 was no longer available. We now have a dozen, I think we have 15 now, don't we, David? 15 either FTM 500s and 510s. And 12 of them are in boxes. We've got a complete APRS box, and our operators have them. They have them right with them. They take them home. They take them home and they practice with them. They run drills with them. We encourage them to use it like their own. Like, use it, leave it on the front seat of your car, run with it, get proficient with it. In the boxes are nifty manuals and adapters and all kinds of other stuff. But we can pass those around, and we'll talk a little bit later before we run out of time here of our trailer and how we use that as a storehouse and a repository to be able to have our people get that equipment as needed.
We secured about a $30,000 grant to get a lot of this equipment. For the most part, that grant money is available to just about every community in the country. It's just working with somebody who's willing to think outside the box and willing to do it. So I want to point out that their role isn't just limited to working with emergency management. We work routinely with the 911 center, work alongside our public safety radio system. And again, it adds another level of redundancy because we have witnessed the full failure of our 911 system in Tompkins County, where you couldn't make a 911 call coming in, you couldn't send radio traffic going out, and we couldn't dispatch fire and EMS through the paging system. Our races team was able to come up with a process of doing that, and they basically just, again, used their think tank to come up with an option for us that we're able to dispatch fire and EMS utilizing their traditional paging system through a process that they were able to come up with that I never even would have thought about. Again, we do monthly drills, open houses with local fire departments, and quarterly exercises. They serve as our county staging team, another level of redundancy for tactical communication, and more recently, they were asked to serve as the principal planner for the MRSE regional exercise for Central New York, which was quite an impressive operation. Dayton was over 20 plus hospitals in all. Yeah, 25 hospitals where we served as, why don't you explain, I didn't take the ball, but real briefly.
Yeah, that's our time.
Okay.
So, our statewide emergency communications drill, we facilitated and worked as net control, and we set our gear up at a hilltop in the central part of our area. We were able to communicate in New York State up into the St. Lawrence River area, the farthest north point of New York State, all the way down into Pennsylvania. And we did most of that from mountaintop to mountaintop through repeaters, and then some through MVIS. We'll introduce David here in a little bit, N2TPQ in the front row here was also able to do some WinLink stuff, and we were able to show that what we could provide and how we could set up and fill that gap. It really demonstrated what we're capable of and how impressive amateur radio could be to fill that void.
What's exciting about this is this really started about 2 years ago, where our team was asked to participate, and it went from being a participant to being the lead commanding group. So that's something to be extremely proud of, and now this entity in New York is reaching back out to our group and asking for them to continue to build these exercises, expand these exercises. And it's really what you're supposed to be doing during Blue Skies, right? Don't just think that a major event's gonna happen in your community, and you're gonna walk into the EOC and say, I'm a radio amateur operator, and I'm here to help. You really need to start this well in advance, fortify your role in your community, so that when the time comes, they already know what value you bring to the table. So what we wanted to do is just give a few examples of some of the things that we do via picture. So what you'll see in this slide, this was at our annual, our tri-annual airport exercise, where we had over 50 victims, and the gentleman that you see wearing a leather vest, the yellow vest, was doing communications from the treatment area back to the staging area. And that's critical because when we needed to advance additional ambulances or additional resources, it wasn't a public safety radio system we were using. We were using amateur bands, and we're using our races team to do that. That would allow us to maintain capacity because we don't have a lot of tactical frequencies in our public safety radio system, so we leverage the ability to have tactical communications through the amateur bands. This is our staging area. Another example of our staging area, and again, what a great opportunity. This is something that if you go to speak with a local emergency manager, you could say, this is something our team has done, or our team is willing to do. There's a model for it, and today we're going to have some pamphlets to hand out along with some of my business cards. And if anybody wants to communicate with me directly after this, and if you want me to help you figure out different ways of bridging the gap with your local emergency manager or your public safety officials, I'm more than willing to do that. This is from the MRSE exercise just a few months ago, or actually it was really last month. Again, quite impressive. I know that there was a worry about whether or not they were going to be able to communicate with all the hospitals, but think about that. This was about a communication exercise within healthcare. Within healthcare. It really didn't have anything to do with like what most people think about local emergency management, but it's an emergency management responsibility here to do communications. This is our good friend David, who's in the front row, one of our races team leaders, and just Jamie, if you want to explain what that notebook is and how you set that up, I think it was quite interesting.
Yeah, sure. So a cool thing to think about what we bring as races operators or areas operators, amateur radio operators. Think about your volunteer fire department. You've got doctors and bankers, right? Lawyers, doctors, and in some of those pictures, you had Kent, that first person that was that first slide that we showed. Not only was he standing there helping deploy and figure out those ambulances, he's a medical doctor. Right? We bring that to the table. That's what you all bring here. Not only are we amateur radio operators, but you're a professional in some place else in your life. And to be able to have an excavator or a doctor or a lawyer or an IT worker is incredibly valuable. So this is David during that surge drill on the left doing he was doing a WinLink connection with one of the hospitals in the far north country. And in the bottom right-hand corner there is one of the views from our trailer set up with the different contacts that we were making with all the different places. And you'll see through these pictures, because we're running out of time, it looks crazy and hectic and there's wires everywhere. And you know why? Because we think on the fly. We have all this stuff that's set up so well, but we also just plain have to unplug stuff and plug stuff in to make it work. And that's exactly where you all shine. That's what you bring to the table where other people can't.
Mission creep.
Absolutely.
Every time I've gone out with a go kit, I found I needed something
That's
else.
right.
So my
That's right.
go kit is huge and covered everything.
So this on the left is an Ickery box. This, we can do some Googling on that, ICRI. It is a multi-mode communication system that basically it hears everything and regurgitates everything however we point it to. And we have found the ability to use that to be able to be useful in other entities and other places. When our county departments or agencies go someplace, they request us to go with them to help get into the other counties or state systems. On the left side, or the right side of that picture was one of our go boxes. This is our county trailer, and we also have a light tower. So we can tow that trailer and a light tower. The vehicle that's towing that trailer is a county-owned vehicle.
This was a good example. So we had a neighboring county that had a flood. They were dispatching units from our county. Our two counties are on completely different frequencies, and we don't really have good interoperability between the two. So our local fire chief, now having worked with our races team, said, can we dispatch the races team to bridge communication between the two different counties? So we deployed our races team down to that event, down to that flood emergency, and utilizing that Hickory box, we're able to put in their UHF frequency to tie it into our 800 megahertz system, and they were able to have interoperability. Nobody directly from emergency management went, but we sent our races team down there to do that, to serve as a communication officer for that multi-county event. That was an actual flood event. Oops, it's a little finicky. And this is another one of our team leaders also coordinating, doing some of the, this wasn't from the MRs.
No, this
as
from
well
our
as-
village. This is in the
Yep.
middle of that flood. You'll see on that one screen, she's got, that's the National Weather Service pulled up using our hotspot. We were able to get that. Again, we had an HF radio, it's a 991A setup, and we were hijacking a local private little homemade repeater that the fire department had. We were able to inject into that with all the craziness of the wires and stuff you saw there on the table.
So, and these are the list of our leaders. They're all amazing amateur radio operators, but again, they're an amazing think tank. So I just want to acknowledge what they do for our county and our surrounding county, and now, quite frankly, our regional area in the state. All of them are very given of their time. So, these are their call signs. If anybody had any questions, I know they would make themselves available to you. I'm sure most of their emails are good on QRZ, or at least I would think they are. But really, we're about to wrap up. I'd love to hear any questions you might have. If not, we'll make sure I stay afterwards and we have some information to pass out, yes.
We'll stick around, and we've got a bunch of flyers and QR codes you can grab to get contact with us. I'm not going to run around with a mic, so yell really loud, and then I'll try to reiterate the question. Go ahead.
Our Races MCOM group is kind of reevaluating things because of a change in leadership. What do you recommend as far as notifying your team in an actual emergency? Phone, radio, email, app on the phone?
All the above. So
Yeah.
we use the rave system.
And I am responding. You familiar with I am responding? It's a text system that coordinates with 911 traffic it's typically used by fire and EMS. And when they send out their tows for those agencies, they'll get a text message to their cell phone. They can acknowledge that they're responding via their cell phone. It goes right back to the 911 center. We set up a I am responding group for our races team, so that's one way of doing it. And we also use the raves notification system.
Just because our repeater system is so robust, the 911 center has purchased. We have 3 repeaters that our 911 center has purchased for us that are on emergency power. So our stuff is always going to work even when the other stuff doesn't.
Speaking of emergency power, when all else fails, amateur radio, or
Always
until
works,
your
yeah.
battery dies.
Yeah.
That's right.
Solar.
Yes, sir.
What's your recommendations on amateurs deploying Starlink drones? Something we've done as a service we can provide, and the entities seem to love that. They don't care whether it's ham radio.
Yeah. So the statement was about the other things that you bring to the table, such as Starlink and that sort of thing.
Yep.